Today's session is looking at how you can embed a culture of continuous improvement using a CI master plan. Presenting the session today is Rebecca Kennedy. Rebecca is the Director and General Manager of CTPM. She is an organizational development and change management professional with a track record in delivering major business transformation programs. So let's get started with the session. I'll now pass you over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Nelson. Okay, let me show my screen. Go. Welcome, everyone. So we're up to number 6 of our free webinar series, which has brought us to the point of starting to talk more about how to make these things a reality. So over the last 6 free webinars, which can be found on YouTube or via our website, we've talked about an introduction to lean and continuous improvement, why it's important now, the key components of it, being reactive and proactive, and we've looked at process mapping. Now today I want to start talking about how do we actually kickstart our lean or continuous improvement journey and the use of a master plan and how important that is. So we're going to jump into a bit of reflection first to look at some of those things that were covered in the last 6 webinars, and then we'll get straight into how to kickstart. So as a reminder to you all, what is lean and continuous improvement? So the goal of lean is to improve the operational performance of your company, including customer satisfaction, the costs incurred, the quality, and the delivery by focusing on the customer and eliminating waste, variability, and inflexibility. So trying to create a lean environment, getting rid of waste. Lean is not a one-off activity, which is where so often we end up. We do one cycle, one little mini project, and we high-five each other and then we stop. It is a journey. It's an ongoing operational strategy that builds a culture of continuous improvement within your organization, and that is what leads to enterprise excellence. So why are people interested in lean and continuous improvement now? Well, as all of you would have experienced, the business landscape's changed. Customers expect faster, higher quality delivery for the same or even lower rates. There's more competition out there at their fingertips. Performance expectations are increasing within the business. So you're being asked to do more with less people, less budgets. And following on that, budgets are static or declining. Everyone is trying to do more with less. So how can we work smarter, not harder? And lean and continuous improvement is our way to do that. The core principles of lean and continuous improvement, so what we want to focus on and the culture we want to build is one that puts the customer at the heart of the business. We want to define value from the customer's perspective in everything that we do. We want to observe our processes so we understand every step in a process, which ones are adding value to the customer and which ones aren't. Where are our wastes? Where are we losing time? Make processes more efficient. So once we've mapped them, how can we make them more efficient? How do we remove those wastes or non-value added steps? To help us then monitor all those improvements we make, we want to strengthen our performance systems and measures so that we can quickly identify and have visual ways of telling whether we are on track towards our operational goals and that enterprise excellence, or other areas we still need to fix. We want to empower our people. This is not just for one person to do or one team to do. This has to be organizational wide. The purpose of lean is that we empower our frontline staff. We want to shift responsibility and accountability towards them to better leverage their skills and knowledge. They're at the front line. They need to be able to identify if an issue before it occurs and know how to resolve it. Or if an issue does occur, how can they fix it and get back to what they need to achieve as soon as possible? Lastly, it's always pursuing perfection. You never reach perfection. You just get closer to it. And so we're always on this. This is what makes it a journey. So our core principles of lean. Hopefully that's not new. This is one slide that I share in every single one of our free webinars because it's so important to understand what are the principles, what's driving us with our lean and continuous improvement journeys. What else we've introduced are the key components. So there are 3 key areas to achieving that culture of continuous improvement. First one is reactive improvement. This one you'd be used to, except you've probably known it as firefighting, and there is a difference with what we refer to as reactive improvement, because it's not only the ability to rapidly identify issues or errors that impact delivery, but it's the ability to resolve them, and most importantly, ensure the issue or error does not occur again anywhere in the organisation. This is where we're really talking about our frontline teams having problem-solving capability and the opportunity to review regularly so that they can identify these areas. As a nation, as a culture, Australians are great at firefighting, coming up with band-aids to fix things. What we're not great as is going back and making sure things don't happen again. And that's where lean and continuous improvement is different. The way we do that is what's known as effective daily management. And there's a separate webinar on that if you wanted to check it out. Stable work plan. Everyone knows what they are doing, how and when, with minimal disruption due to changes in priorities and deliverables. This is the golden dream, that what we plan to do for the start of the day or the week actually is what we end up working on and achieving. The closer we can work to having a stable work plan, the more focus we can put on reactive and proactive improvement. So a goal is to focus on achieving a stable work plan. Lastly, we have proactive improvement, which is where most companies start and are very good at. These are your projects, your events, changes to technology, which are all big bang pieces to get us to our long-term improvement vision. But what we found is unless these 3 pieces work together, you're not going to have enough time for either one on its own. So here we see proactive improvement getting us to our world-class performance and our vision. We have reactive improvement, which is just our stable daily plan and how quickly we can get back to that if any issues happen, and our work plan along the bottom. Now, the next slide shows us what happens over time. Most companies fall into the trap of only focusing on proactive improvement because it's shiny, it's good, we get big outcomes. But in our first graph there, if we only focus on that and not reactive improvement or a stable work plan, we're not freeing up enough time to ever reinvest back into our proactive improvement. So first cycle goes great, we get the time investment and we get the buy-in from everybody in the business. The second one runs okay, but we don't get as much impact. Third one, same again, we're kind of hitting a bit of a status quo instead of impact. And that is simply because we're not freeing up enough time to focus on that area because we're not using our reactive improvement or our stable work plan. So by only focusing on proactive improvement, you will not reach your goal of world-class performance. However, if we focus on all 3 in our next graph and we prioritize effective daily management and reactive improvement first, we slowly free up time, which then allows us to focus on the big pieces. And I'll show you a graph in a moment into how that actually works. But it's a bit of an 80-20 rule. Our frontline people, in terms of the frustrations they have on a daily basis, that's our 80%. If we can get rid of all those little niggly pieces, it's going to free up time for proactive improvement projects. So they're the 3 key pieces we want to working together in our strategy at all times. So the 2 goals we want to keep in mind, linking that strategy, our 6 key principles, are these 2 things. 1, we need to identify issues and problems, improvements at the earliest possible time. And it's through that progressive ongoing engagement of the entire workforce. As I said, not just one team, not just one continuous improvement coordinator. We result in a workforce who is skilled in problem solving, creating and running a visual workplace. That is so important because if it's not visual, how do we know if a problem's going to occur or when it has occurred? We need to make things visual, whether that be measurements, alerts. There's different ways depending upon your business to get things visual so we can quickly resolve problems at the earliest possible time. And then the third piece is prevention at source. How do we even stop them from happening? Stopping the issues before they actually happen is one of the ultimate outcomes when you start working towards that world-class performance, is having an organisation of people that will do those three things as the norm. The other key thing is we don't want people working on this full time. As we said, we want everybody in the organisation. So the goal we work towards is having a 5 to 10% of all employees' normal work time is put into strategically driven ongoing continuous improvement activities. And whether that be through a cross-functional team, so cross-functional teams across departments tending to work on the bigger issues, your proactive improvement, or your area-based teams, which are your department teams. Either way, we want everybody using at least 5% of their time focused on continuous improvement to build that workforce that are able to problem solve, create and run a visual workplace, and prevent its source. And that is how we sustain. Now that sounds great. And I'll just go into the cross-functional versus area-based teams a little bit. So I mentioned there that we have two types of teams that we tend to run all of our improvement cycles through. Yes, it comes down to individuals, but also we have the teams. These teams are problem solvers. Now, on this map, you see the cross-functional teams. This is your cross-department teams. As I mentioned before, these are the ones that are taking on the bigger problems. They're taking on the wider, sometimes company-wide, or it may actually just be in one area, but it's a bigger problem to solve. And with the Pareto chart there, we can see that they are dealing more with the top-end section. So the ones that make up a lot of loss, they're bigger pieces to fix, and there's less of them. Then we have our area-based teams, which are all focused on prevention at source. So these are our department teams who are looking for their common frustrations and easy ways to fix them. These are the guys who are doing the job every day. They already know often or have ideas on how to fix these things. So an area-based team gives them the opportunity to do that. And every team we use a very easy framework of plan, do, check, act. We want to expose the problems, fix it, plan and standardize, and then regular monitoring to sustain it. And this is an ongoing cycle. And every team we run follows this. Even our problem-solving methodology follows this cycle. So it can go small and it can expand depending upon what it needs to address. And this also provides everybody in the company with an opportunity to be involved in finding solutions. And that way we build ownership, empowerment, and engagement. They sound like buzzwords, but if we get people involved, they are going to own these changes. So that's the difference between cross-functional and area-based. So cross-department, department teams, and what those two teams would focus on. Any questions on kind of the reflection point, the history of what is involved, the types of teams, the lean principles? Okay, well, let's jump straight into looking at how do we even do this then? So it's wonderful to know all those different components that exist and what we need to do in terms of having a cross-department team focusing on proactive improvements, trying to get our reactive up and running. So if we're new to an organisation and they want to kick off their journey, this is the three-phase pathway we recommend. First of all is awareness and preparation. Here is where we want to create a critical mass of decision makers and key personnel with a common understanding and vision of the way forward. This is the planning piece. This is where our master plan, you're probably wondering when the master plan came into it. This is where the master plan is an output. So it's really important you do your prep work in the first month to get ready to start this journey. We then go into the demonstrate and learning phase. So this is when we start running some pilot teams. We start to get a feel of what the issues are out there, where are the opportunities to improve, and we start getting some traction and skill set within particular pilot teams. Now, these can be cross-department teams, or area teams, or a mixture of both, depending upon what our vision is that was set in step 1. Then lastly, it's the cascading and sustaining. So annually, yearly, we should have a 5-year vision. How do we roll this out across the entire organization? How do we keep sustaining those improvements we make and achieve that long-term vision of operational excellence? So awareness and preparation, we demonstrate, we learn, we refine, we cascade and sustain. And we should have a map, a master plan that does that, that shows that pathway for us. What we're going to look at now in a little bit more detail is the awareness and preparation phase, because this is where your master plan starts to get built. And what I have personally found working with a lot of companies is they want to jump straight into step 2. They love to pilot. They want to see, they want a taster of what's going on. And that is brilliant because we get a real feel for the framework. The team gets a sense of what is possible. But if we do a pilot team, we still need to come back to step 1, awareness and preparation, because this is the foundation of how we move forward. And the only way we're ever going to sustain or build that culture is if we have the foundation built in awareness and preparation. So why awareness and preparation? None of these quotes should be new to you. The most famous of them all, Benjamin Franklin. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. A goal without a plan is just a wish. Unless commitment is made, there are only promises and hopes, but no plans. Planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. And this one I find really interesting. Brian Tracy, who has written a lot of sales focused books. Every minute you spend in planning saves you 10 minutes in execution, which gives you 1,000% return on energy. When you look at it in that way, why don't we not invest the time in planning? We are of such a day and age where we just want to rush in and do. And often that is where we end up with reworks and re-having to do things. So by investing the time in the planning stage, we will have better outcomes in the end. So awareness and preparation phase, the goal being to create a critical mass of decision makers and key personnel with a common understanding and vision of the way forward. So we want our decision makers, our top of house, to all be aligned in the language they use in regards to continuous improvement, the vision of where we're going and how we're going to get there. So Lean CI has a strong bottom-up focus by getting all employees engaged and empowered. And that is everything I've spoken to you about till now. I talked about empowering our front line, problem solving, cross-department area or department-focused teams. But in the awareness and preparation phase, the senior management are so important and critical. The only way we sustain and embed is if it's led by senior management. Therefore, it's critical as a starting point to establish a leadership team that is responsible for continuous improvement, for the strategy and the master plan. Often that leadership team would be made up of operations manager, team leads, quality risk managers, human resources, training managers. You want the financial controller in there because we want to track savings, we want to track dollars, and we want to know figures, and along with a designated CI coordinator. So there should be a CI coordinator, but it is not their job to drive this or own this. It is owned by the leadership team. So that is the very first thing you need to do, is identify a leadership team that is going to own the CI journey, the continuous improvement journey. It is then essential that the leadership team have a good level of lean and CI understanding in order to establish a common vision for improvement before developing their strategy, master plan, or commencing any activities. So we've got to upskill. We've got to get everyone on the same page. As we said, we want them talking the same language, and that way we can then come up with a vision that everyone agrees to. So the first step we recommend is that all leadership team members and any other key decision makers in the business complete an introduction to Lean CI workshop. That gives them their baseline foundation knowledge. That lets them know the principles, the strategy components. What's the difference between a cross-department and an area department team? We've got to give them all the fundamentals and the tools that exist in the toolbox of continuous improvement before we go anywhere near the strategy or vision. Then we recommend a week later, 2 weeks later, that you run or that they attend an introduction strategy workshop. And that is where the site leadership team, it's very tailored to them, have the opportunity to map out their improvement journey and start building that master plan. So some of the things that would happen in that planning workshop would be confirming key success factors, goal-aligned performance measures for the site, creating that improvement vision for the site. Most companies have a vision, but do we have an improvement vision? Do we have our continuous improvement goals? Divide the site into, divide the company into defined delivery areas and support areas that may become department teams. Select the teams that might have the biggest opportunity so that you can focus pilots on them. Establish the structure and roles for improvement, so making sure we have that CI coordinator and whatever resources they need to support them. Establish initial policies and guidelines, and then most importantly, start creating that master plan. As an outcome of that strategy workshop, we want a draft master plan. We also want to know where we're going to pilot our teams, our first cycles, and how we're going to communicate out to the organisation this strategy and get them all on the same page. So, we talk about the master plan as an outcome. How long should we plan out to? Do we just do for the first pilot group, for the first cycle, or do we plan out longer? Well, I keep finding from a guy who's done a lot of research into businesses and how they've been successful is Joel Barker. And his study on what makes people, companies, and countries successful, or winners, is those with the longest time perspective are the most successful. So those with the longest sight, vision way forward, will be the most successful. Therefore, CI master plan should be a 5-year plan. It takes at least 5 years to start reaching world-class quality, world-class performance. So, as we said, you're always pursuing perfection. 5 years will get you much closer to that perfection than anything else. So we recommend a 5-year plan showing how CI, continuous improvement, will be cascaded across the entire site. So this links into area 3. You should then have a more detailed plan for your annual CI plan. So 5 years, quite high level. That's the master plan. It will change. It will be agile, but it gives us a line of sight of where we're heading. We then have our 1-year annual plan, which is a little bit more detailed. We want to include if there's any shifts or part-time workers. We want that level of detail in there. And how, once again, we're cascading and rolling out our improvement plan. Lastly, there should be a very, very detailed cycle plan. Most cycles that we run, whether it be proactive or reactive, is usually 4-month cycle. And that's because we want to hit a milestone. We want to hit something we can celebrate within 4 months to keep employees engaged. So your 4-month cycle plan or schedule will show the weekly activities that need to take place to achieve a specific outcome. So 3 levels to planning. The critical parts of a CI master plan. It shouldn't just be the projects you're going to run. It must include education and training. It has to include the reactive improvement piece. So how is daily management captured in there? How are things escalated? People development. Are all our people being given the opportunity and being empowered? We want to make sure that we've got process, quality, customer agility, focused, proactive improvement cycles happening. Company-wide processes, focused, proactive improvement. So some may be department, some may be company-wide. We want them to be specified on this plan. And lastly, there should be leadership activities as well. So reviewing the plan, how are we going to plan? Remember, the plan is owned by the leadership team. It is not the CI coordinator's job to own the plan. It is the leadership team's job. So those leadership activities must be on the master plan as well. Here's an example of a very scary Excel sheet, but it gives you an idea of all the levels in it. This is the 5-year plan. We cut it down by cycle in the columns, and then activities are the rows. Color coding to help us see. But you can see at the front end of the sheet, it starts small, and we get further and further, more rows involved as we move to the right. That's because we're cascading across the organization. We're starting with our pilots and we're rolling out across. Our master plan gives us that opportunity to plan to that level of detail. It does not have to look like this, but the goal is to have all of this visual on here, have that leadership part, have that people development part, have all the cycles that are running, the types of cycles. So a little bit more detail around an extract from the example of the 5-year. We then have an example of the annual plan, which, as we said, is just a bit more of a granular view into the months. So we've got months at the top here. So we want to know week by week, month by month, what is happening with our 5-year plan. So what's happening this year? And then an example of what's happening for a cycle. If we've got multiple teams running, we've got them listed down the left. We've still got our leadership activities happening. So we have those three levels of planning that need to take place. Now, final point that we need to cover today is how we monitor this progress through 3 to 4 month cycles, and it's supported by pre-cycle strategy planning sessions. So as we said, each piece of improvement we do, we generally call a cycle with an outcome. So we want to have an outcome, a milestone reached that we can celebrate. We learn from that, we start our plan, do, check, act process again. But it means at the end of each cycle, or just before the end of it, we should be reflecting on what are we going to do next. So reflection and learning from the current cycle to help us reprioritize what we have set for the next cycle. Are there any urgent or current business priorities that need to be pushed forward in our plan? Are the people development plans being run? 5-year master plan and baseline analysis. So we want to keep reflecting on that 5-year plan. Is that where we're still heading? Is that where we should still be heading? And what do we need to adapt in it to make sure we reach our vision? And an opportunities sheet. It's really important that the leadership team who are in charge of this have an opportunity sheet to capture all the things we may not have had time to work on. What often happens when we first kick off continuous improvement, so much things bubble to the surface, all those frustrations bubble up to the surface, and we can't work on all of them at once. So we need to make sure there's a live opportunities sheet tracking all of those things so that those who have raised them know they're eventually going to get to, that they don't become disheartened that they're not being worked on first. And those opportunities should be built into our plan so that once again, everybody in the organization should be able to see this plan and know what's prioritized and what's being worked on when and how we're going to achieve everything. Final wrap-up point here is, and I mentioned it earlier, who runs the plan? It is the site leadership team. It is the leadership team that is in charge of continuous improvement. Your CI coordinator there is there to coordinate you, is to coordinate the leadership team and bring the information together. It is not their job to make sure that every manager and their team is doing their reactive improvement. Those managers are either on the leadership team or their manager is on the leadership team. It is their responsibility to make sure they are following the plan. And that leadership team needs to hold those people accountable. So your CI coordinator there is to coordinate, is to pull you all together and keep you on track, but it is not their job to make sure the plan is followed. Okay, guys, we are out of time. So let's open it up for any final questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Rebecca. And as Rebecca said, if you have any questions, please press the raise your hand button or type in your questions in the control panel box and we'll get her to answer it just before we wrap this up. Just wait a little bit. we don't have a question, but we have a sandwich from David saying that it was a great overview and thank you very much for the presentation.
Oh, well, thank you, David, for attending.
Okay, and since it doesn't seem like there's many more questions, I'll wrap this thing up. So before we get going, just a quick reminder that a recording of the webinar will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel this afternoon, so please feel free to share it with your colleagues. And if you have any further questions on today's session, feel free to contact us at any time, and Rebecca will be happy to answer any of their questions. On behalf of everyone at CTPM, thank you for attending, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.